an unwarranted and unearned display of fellowship and good faith with someone who has repeatedly lied, and still this risk has been repeatedly afforded to this president, who's a known liar. Of course, Trump broke their agreement by lying about the meeting on Twitter. That part is not surprising. What is amazing is how mainstream journalists again and again try to engage with Trump by using the same backdoor or on the same side really processes while expecting a different result. Here's an idea that's not new, but apparently still novel. Stop agreeing to off-the-record meetings with the lying man. He's going to betray your shoddy agreement and make you look like a fool while giving the public nothing and giving you nothing. Yeah, not everyone's on the same side. Like, they're not playing on the same side. Like, this is not, there's no rules, there's no political norms anymore. They just don't get that. And that's why they're going to keep losing. With this dumb people. Yeah, so this is way back from a man, a good fellow, named Hamilton Nolan. So, yeah, this, he kind of laid out here what politicians gain, what journalism gains, and what public gains? Nothing. So politicians gain a chance to convince journalists of their point of view with no risk to themselves, a chance to ingratiate themselves with the press, a chance to flatter and impress journalists, which may lead to better coverage in the future. Journalists gain a sense of importance, a sense of access to power. That's a big one. And the belief they've gained an understanding of someone powerful that's deeper than what is generally offered to the public. And that makes them kind of feel a little bit cool. Like they're in power. Like they have something. Like they're people. Like they're people who are in the know and they're powerful. That's why a lot of people, journalists these days, do get into journalism. Yeah, and here's what the public gains. Squat. Nothing. So, A.G. Sulzberger, you stupid. You dumb. Anyway. Speaking of stupid and dumb people, how about our next story with Mr. Jason Lewis, Republican Representative Jason Lewis of Minnesota. He's made more unearthed, disgraceful comments. Lewis, who is sometimes referred to as a mini-Trump, made a conservative radio host from 2009 to 2012. He made these comments as a conservative radio host from 2009 to 2012 in the subsequent podcast. In addition to making racist and misogynistic statements, Lewis seems to have little respect for his constituents, particularly Democrats, whom he referred to as idiot voters in a 2012 episode of his radio show. The comment is among several questionable statements Lewis has made in the past that were recently shared by CNN's Guess Who? K-File, because literally his entire job is look for dumb stuff politicians say. They should do that for the guy who owned the guy. Bill Shine, who banned the reporter. They should do a K-File review on Bill Shine. I'm sure they're doing it. I hope so. Yeah, K-File obtained these audio recordings from Minnesota Post columnist Michael Broadcrobb, who was the Minnesota Republican Party's former deputy chair. In those recordings, made before Lewis was nearly elected to Congress in 2016, he referred to recipients as government assistance programs as parasites. And as CNN reported, he also claimed the black community had traded one plantation out for another. Yes, that's how we do it. That's coming out. That's called coming out there and saying it. Like, this is what conservatives have pretty much been hinting at, especially in the Obama years. Like, there was a lot of this rhetoric going on, Stuart Varney, Fox Business, talking about, like, that kind of part of the Republican Party was like, these people are parasites. They're feeding off our money. Lewis called Democratic voters unpatriotic and scoundrels. Most of the parasites outnumber the producers in a September 2012 interview or segment to describe why then President Barack Obama was leading Mitt Romney in the election polls. Then, when the parasites outnumber the producers, the party of parasites will give the majority of votes. Well, they still have, but they're parasitic president is not elected. These comments add to others reported by CNN earlier this month, which accused African Americans of having an entitlement mentality. He also lamented his inability to call women sluts without generating public scorn. Here's the quote: "Does a woman have the right to behave? I know there's a double standard because the way men chase women and running around. I'm not going to get there, but you know what I'm talking about. But it used to be that a woman were held to a little bit of a higher standard. We required modesty from women. Now, are we beyond these days where women can behave as a slut, but you can't call her a slut? Yes. Don't do it. Don't do it. He also criticized the Civil Rights Act of 1964, calling it unconstitutional, criticized desegregation busing, and compared the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 to Jim Crow. So now the government determines who you shall hire, who you shall work next to, who you're going to be thrown in jail, and when you're going to be thrown in jail or fined civilly for refusing to employ or serve or do whatever the government says you ought to do, Lewis said. And now you're going to be thrown in jail for doing whatever the government says you ought to do. The irony of this, the last time we tried this during the Jim Crow, when the government used... the irony of this is the last time we tried this was during Jim Crow, when the government used to mandate segregation. Yeah, he was referring to, again, this is the Americans with Disabilities Act. He's saying this is like Jim Crow. Hiring disabled people. Okay. This is great. Yeah, so Lewis's spokesperson, Becky Allery, tried to downplay it all by saying voters should ignore his comments where the congressman made while working as a radio host and focus on his record. CNN's coverage does little to add to the debate, she said. His Democratic opponent in the upcoming midterms, Andy Craig, a former journalist and healthcare manufacturing executive, told the New York Times that comments like this don't represent Minnesota values. Let's hope not come November, because it may be a little bit of a problem. Oh yeah, and by the way, he's the nominee. It's Minnesota's 2nd district. Yeah, and it's not a good idea. Like, let's hope support Angie Craig here, because this ain't a good one. Anyway, yeah, we got Jeff Sessions now. He announced Monday. Talk about something that this ain't a good thing. Jeff Sessions, he announced a religious liberty task force. Okay, religious liberty task force. Like, they already sound sketchy enough. A task force for religious liberty, that sounds a little bit sketchy. But when you're hearing it from Jeff Sessions, that sounds a little bit, like, very sketchy. Here is him announcing it.
Today I am announcing our next step, the Religious Liberty Task Force, to be co-chaired by the Associate Attorney General, Jesse, and the Assistant Attorney General for Office of Legal Policy, Beth. The task force will help the department fully implement our religious liberty guidance by ensuring that all Justice Department components, and we got a lot of components around the country, are upholding that guidance in the cases they bring and defend, the arguments they make in court, the policies and regulations they adopt, and how we conduct our operations. That includes making sure our employees know their duties to accommodate people of faith. And as the people in this room know, you have to practice what you preach. So we're going to remain in contact with religious groups across America to ensure that their rights are being protected. We have been holding listening sessions and will continue to host them in the coming weeks. This administration is animated by that same American view that has led us for 242 years, that every American has a right to believe and worship and exercise their faith in the public square.
Joyful. I'm sure this is going to turn out to be a great idea. Yeah, I love that very much. I think, listening sessions for this, really? Like, talk about, like, these priorities are so messed up in my... Like, we just... Like, where are we with this? So, yeah, so the task force will be co-chaired, again, by Associate Attorney General Jesse Panuccio, and Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Policy, Beth Williams. It aims to protect religious groups from, quote-unquote, persecution by prioritizing the rights of religious people in the DOJ's policies and legal battles. And by religious people, Sessions really means Christians who don't like gay people. think that's pretty clear. Yeah, I think we all know where he's coming from. Like, I hope we can all be adults about this, right? Like, we can look at his record. Like, Steph, we know who he's going to go after. Yeah, so the dangerous movement challenging religious freedom session said, referring to how a Colorado baker had his fight for his right to refuse making a wedding cake for a gay couple, and how U.S. senators asked judicial and executive branch nominees about dogma. That is, that's some great stuff. Great buzzwords there. He says, we not only have the freedom to worship, but the right to exercise our faith. Constitution protections don't enter the parish, the parking lot, nor can our parish parking lot, nor can our freedoms be confined to our basements. Like, these people, they think their religion is under attack, but every senator is Christian. Every lawmaker is Christian. Every judge is Christian. There's no atheist candidates for president. Sure, Republicans focus on religion more. Republicans are in power now. And, this is such a non-issue. But it's going to be a great way for the religious right to say they don't want gays to have any rights. Kind of works hand in hand there. But anyway, so this isn't even about protecting religious liberties anymore. It's about taking away the rights of anyone whom Sessions may disagree with, whether it be LGBTQ people or women, maybe African Americans when it comes to voting rights. Some of whom, lest we forget, may actually be Christians themselves. But why did they choose this deviant lifestyle? So this is not the first time the Trump administration has attempted to selectively uphold religious liberties. In May, President Trump signed an executive order to ensure that faith-based groups have strong advocates in the White House, and whatever that means. What kind of executive order is that? And in January, the Department of Health and Human Services created the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division. So just more religious gobbledygook. No religion is under attack in this country except for one, and it's not Christianity. I got news for you. All right, now we got a very fun story for the end of the day. Just the best. Thomas Homan may no longer be be in charge of ICE, but that still doesn't mean he can't pop up from time to time, but to literally moan and groan. That's all he's doing, moan and groan, to remind everyone that he's a heartless monster who couldn't care less about the human cost incurred by children detained during his time in office. He was interviewed by PBS is Martin Smith for a forthcoming episode of Frontline, focusing on Trump's immigration policies. Homan was active by the now famous audio from ProPublica, obtained in federal detention centers in June. I didn't hear the tape, Homan claimed, adding he heard plenty of kids sobbing during decades at immigration work. I need to hear children cry, he said. Well, oh my God. That's okay. Yeah, if children are crying, maybe you're not doing your job right. Yeah, and they're asking for their parents at age 5. They're not doing the job. You're not doing your job right. So this is his response after Smith pressed on and played the audio. As Homan as heard the time. As Homan listened to this. So absolutely, he says, I'm a parent. It's sad, but when the government chooses to enforce the law and separate the parents, that have been prosecuted, just like every U.S. citizen, a person in the country gets separated when he gets arrested. But people want a different set of rules for an illegal alien. So immediately, that was incredible. No moment of humanity, no actual human response. Revert right back. Right back, incredible, to those hard right immigration talking points. That is something you don't see often. Yeah, so this is not the first time Homan has been horrifically underwhelming in its response to the government's policy of jailing immigrant children. Last month, he also described the situation as sad while insisting that parents bringing their children to the U.S. while freeing horrific circumstances in their native countries simply don't understand America's immigration laws. So he spoke on Monday with MSNBC's Morning Joe, which obtained the preview of footage of Homan's interview ahead of the premiere of the Frontline episode, which is tomorrow, by the way. Smith decided Homan's subpar reaction described Homan's Martin Smith is a journalist, described Holman's subpar reaction to stopping children. It was abundantly